Hey everybody, Shukaboa here with my second round episode of Skyline6, Vanilla Multiplayer Collab project. We've gone through our first round with the crew and one guest builder, and the city has really grown in both size and character. If you've been following each player along as we pass the save game, you'll know that this is really something special. If you're new, check out the playlist and catch up on this epic build series. You should also join us on our Discord in the City of Friends server, where we all hang out all the time. Links to everything are in the description, so be sure to take a look. This will be my last episode for a while, because in real life, I'm a merchant mariner, which means I work on ships all around the world for months at a time. I can't do too much gaming while at sea, unfortunately, but I wanted to make this episode really special. How? It's going to be heavy on different types of maritime ports you probably didn't even know you should or even could build in your vanilla cities. To do that, I'm going to have 9 different projects, each self-contained and fast-paced, so you can go back and watch at slower speed if you want to study the techniques. First, we'll create a service trumpet and then a system trumpet interchange to get road access out across the bay. Then we'll construct a hyper-realistic power station that has a tanker dock so ships can deliver the fuel oil needed to generate electricity. Because I felt bad about the oil power plant, we'll offset our guilt with a marine wildlife sanctuary. After that, a bulk aggregate facility that has waterway access for small ships and barges. We'll create a working waterfront, which traditional maritime communities use to showcase for tourism. This massive steel plant will have its own wharf, so ships can arrive directly. And this multi-purpose shipyard will build new ships and repair existing ones. Finally, we'll create an old waterfront town that looks like it's realistically been growing around the maritime community for a long time. Now, this isn't a tutorial video, and I'd say this is going to be medium to advanced level in difficulty. Remember, I'm not using a single mod to help me build any of this. Really just one camera mod to help me maintain a camera position while I'm recording. I've carefully edited the following projects with over 750 cuts to create the smoothest variable speed time-lapse possible. It will be fast-paced, so use the YouTube playback speed button to slow it down if you need to. Time to work on our service trumpet interchange. Service means that it will connect a large highway to a local road, and I want to do that here because we're in a completely undeveloped area of the map. We've got to cross over this railway as well as the highway, and on the trumpet ramp side, we'll build it on the terrain instead of using elevated segments. Over to the other side of the trumpet, I'll use the hole digging method to ensure that I get smooth, elevated segments without using mods that ensure constant level of sloping. It's a bit of extra work, but it is absolutely possible to do this without mods. I'll add some hill underneath the elevated segments here because I really just wanted them so that I could have consistent safety rails for crossing over the railroad tracks. Let's look all around to make sure there are no lumps and bumps in our road. Ay caramba, we got a lump. Let's quickly smooth that out so we have a nice slope. Now that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I know that with a mod you can sort that sort of thing out in a couple of clicks, but for vanilla and console players that's just not an option. Honestly though, I've seen tons of modded players that still have lumpy roads. So here is our finished service Trumpet interchange. You'll notice my detailing was very light because this is in the middle of nowhere, really. Just some guardrails and signs are all it took to make this look pretty good. But you see that it doesn't have to be super fancy in order to look really elegant. Something to keep in mind when you're detailing your interchanges. Okay, so now that we have an interchange, we need it to actually go somewhere, right? I'm going to use the 2-lane highway to create a rural route that goes all the way along this side of the bay. We can cut across this river branch here, and then again over here. Nice. This bridge came out smooth on the first try. That doesn't always happen like that. I'll try to follow the tree line sometimes in order to get a realistic looking road. We don't want a straight line. But now, this looks a little too squiggly. I want curves, but they shouldn't look like a sine wave. I think that's looking better now. Not so sinusoidal. Okay, so without going too crazy, I just want to show you that sometimes you should just add a hill. Say no to flat earth by using terrain in your maps. Nothing is this flat in real life except salt pans. I'll clear out the trees that go a little bit too close to the shoulder of the road. And now we'll set up to connect our rural road across this island and back to the other side of the map. To do that, we'll have to traverse this strait here with a large bridge. Now there's one number that I want you to keep in mind for this project, and that number is 32. We want our bridge to be 32 meters above sea level, and it will be 32 cells across in order to get a maximum length 2-tower span. At 8 meters per cell, that means a 256 meter long bridge. With the bridge 32 meters high, the waterline markers for the bridge towers will be at sea level exactly. This also means that most large ships could theoretically pass underneath this bridge. We'll slope the terrain down from the bridge towards the other end of the island so that our road can go across. This curved bridge that goes over the 2 channels here looks nice and smooth, thanks to the terrain preparation we did. Over here, I'll start to taper the amount of lanes from 2 to 4, which will then increase to 6 at the bridge. Now it's time to put in a toll booth. Yeah, I know, nobody likes to pay tolls, but we have to fund this project somehow. Here, I'll try to slope all of this flat terrain up to our toll booth. At the booth, we'll connect a few dirt roads in an antler-like configuration, which took me some figuring out to get right. This will help get the highways lined up smoothest and the lane mathematics working as best as possible without TMPE. Okay, so let's label each corner to keep track of what's going on here. First, I'll connect C to A and then A to C directly over the slope. using some gravel roads to taper the spacing between them. Next, I'll put a parallel segment going from A in the direction of C. With more gravel roads, we'll clear out this section and dig out the terrain for our underpass. By using industrial roads and upgrading them after, it's easier to use the road guidelines. Now we can connect the 3 overpasses above this curved section. By building our trumpet ramps on the short end of the slope, we'll connect B to A and C to B. Now let's create the BC ramp, keeping it tight to the rest of the interchange. And then finally on this side, the AB ramp right along the slope. I decided to call this type of trumpet a French horn, because it's curvier than a regular trumpet and it has that 3rd overpass. Now we'll just smooth out the terrain and detail it off camera. Take a look at our magnificent suspension bridge that leads across this major waterway and over to our French Horn interchange. This interchange is a system interchange, which means that it connects 2 major roadways rather than a larger one to a smaller one. You can see that again, I went with basic detailing, some trees, vegetation, and some fencing for guardrails. Along the water's edge, I added more large rocks in a way that looked like a prominent cliff. Hey, if you came here for maritime stuff, but already like the roadwork, please do me a favor and hit that like button. Leave me a comment telling me what you think. I really want to know your opinions on everything in this video, because I worked hard to make it. Okay, now it is time to prepare for our boat stuff. To do that, I want to begin by spamming down some fishing industry as well as some oil and ore industry. This way, I can level up to unlock all the buildings that come with each of these and have the flexibility to do what I want. I won't time-lapse the leveling up like I did with my last episode. But if you don't know what I'm doing here, it's just going to be me growing each industry as fast as I can and then deleting everything except for the main building. I'll show you just a little bit of the setup here so you get the idea. While I'm at it, I'll also level up a brand new park area and also level up all of the other areas across the city, because why not? Okay, so we've unlocked everything for fishing, our new industry areas, and for a zoo. Now, if we take a look right here, we see that there's a huge patch of oil under the water. Well, I want to access that to make a super realistic looking facility right here. I'll grab a terrain height of 5 meters above sea level, and then start raising up the terrain all over the place so that I can do another vanilla technique. We'll have to wait for the water to be displaced before continuing, which will be a recurring theme with all this work we're doing. Once the water is out of the way, we can go back and dig a hole below sea level. Now, using a monorail track road, I'll create a short pier that kind of looks like it has pipelines on it. Next to the pier, I'll use elevated gravel paths to create what are known in my line of work as dolphins. Dolphins are essentially just pilings to which mooring lines can be attached. Remember, tanker ships don't need a lot of dock space. Their cargo manifolds are amidships, and so you just need to make sure there are some places to tie up the bow and stern lines. Now we'll create a road to connect to the dock, and to which we can attach some more infrastructure in just a few moments. Next, we can extend the monorail tracks without a road over in this direction. Let's unpause for a moment to let our water rush back in. Oh no, look at this water, ay caramba. No, it's alright, everything's fine here. It's really not that big of a deal over on this side of the map. I will run the simulation for a while though to make sure all the water in the map has a chance to settle down. These types of water projects can take a while to stabilize. So now it's time to move our oil industry area over so that we can get to work. We'll prep the terrain to get a large oil tank storage asset down along the road we built. On this side, we'll place the oil cavern storage near the pipeline because it has some manifolds and pipes and it just kind of looks appropriate here. Remember, without custom assets, we're going to have to imagine that some things are something other than what the game tells us that they are, such as this oil drilling rig, which we'll imagine is a small lighthouse. Remember, our oil is arriving by sea. Over here, we'll have to play by the game rules and place some assets to create plastics and petroleum for our industries to function, but they're all generic looking enough that it really doesn't matter. Like I said in the beginning of the video, this isn't going to be a refinery, which is where you would find things like that, but it's going to be a fuel oil power station. And right here, we'll place the vanilla oil power plant, which is a bit cartoonish on its own, but mixed with other oil assets looks pretty decent. Now let's create the entrance to our facility and connect up to our rural road. We'll use a toll booth to appear as a controlled access gate with the side bonus of raising us a few extra bucks from each truck that passes by. Now we can move the main building over here near the trees. We'll unpause to get things running and start connecting up our utilities. We don't need to run any power lines here because we already have a power station, but for this lighthouse we'll have to jump the connection somehow. I'll come back to that in a second, but let's put a tsunami buoy out here to act as a navigation buoy near this point. I'll use power lines just for now, and now I'm going to turbo speed the simulation for a long time so I can see the pollution. That was like 5 minutes sped up to 1 second. Let's look at the pollution radius. We really want to cover this up as best as we can. Without using any mods to remove the pollution, it's going to take strategic placement of buildings, terrain, and trees. We'll start by putting down storage buildings here because we'll need them to collect materials, but they also don't create any pollution. I'm going to paint a neighborhood over this area so that we can add oil industry specialization. And the default name is Butler Park, but we could call it Butler Point, and then we'll call the industry area Butler Point Power Station. With some more select oil industry buildings, it will make our area more efficient, but also cover up pollution and add some realistic looking buildings into the mix. We can also zone a few specialized oil buildings to get some of those products into our supply chain. Remember that specialized industry products are different than Industries DLC products, as Autolikos reminded me after my last round's coal power plant crisis. Very good idea to have a fire station over here. And now our electricity has jumped to the lighthouse. Excellent. I'm just going to rearrange some of these warehouse yards because I like the look of the different materials being stored. We'll speed it up so they get back into balance. And finally, for this corner, I'll make a small hill and add some of the sugar maples and generic pine trees that aren't affected by pollution. Now, when we take a look at the whole area, we see that our pollution is covered up as best as it can be. We can't remove the haze without mods, but at least there's no throbbing brown stain on the ground. So, here is the detailed fuel oil power station, which will provide a fair amount of electricity to this side of the map without the need to run power lines across the bay. Of course, the game doesn't have oil tankers, so by using some assets in a creative way, we can at least pretend that it could. At the very least, it's an extremely realistic facility in the build. Whether you're playing vanilla or modded, there's a lot of imagination needed to create some of the most dynamic projects. Leave me a comment about how you've done some creative projects in your city. I'd really love to read about what you did. Okay, so I confess, after building that oil facility with all that pollution mitigation and everything, I felt a bit guilty. So in order to mitigate my guilt, I've decided to use our new 5-star zoo area to make a marine wildlife sanctuary over on this island. This spot over here has a nice little cove that we can imagine is a feeding and or breeding ground for some charismatic marine megafauna. Let's move our main gate over and set up here to create our entrance to the sanctuary. We'll place down the sea life enclosure asset and take a look to see if it sits at a good level. It doesn't, so let's move it and then adjust the shoreline and place it back. Now, let's run a path over to it from the main gate. And we can place some restrooms and a souvenir shop over here as well. Then we'll place a cafe and a fishing dock from the nature park over in this little corner. I usually don't do too much detailing on camera, but I'll just extend this cafe here a little bit because why not? It'll be nice. We'll place down some hedges to frame the area, add some more tables and benches, a couple of trees, and now everything is... what the... Ay caramba! Okay, so my video file was corrupted here, and I didn't realize it until I'd already passed the save game file on. So in 5 seconds, I'll tell you real quick that I end up placing a ferry stop nearby and run a shuttle bus from that stop to the gate. We'll take a look at the finished park in just a second. Now we'll jump back into the video where I'm following the sun in order to get an accurate orientation of north, south, east, and west. By following the sun as it sets, we get an idea of where west is on this absolutely not astronomically correct map. I'll pause the game and just draw a gravel road here real quick, pointing approximately at the sunset location. Wow, look at this aurora going on. You don't get this in Roslyn Peninsula, that's for sure. And here's a full moon, the same as it is every night. Beautiful. Okay, enough of the admiration. Let's check out where the sun rises so we can get our east bearing. We see the sun is rising right behind that mountain over yonder. So we'll draw another gravel road and compare the two to see how close they are to parallel. Looks like they're pretty close. Now, in the finished marine sanctuary, I'll draw a decorative compass rose so that the rest of the crew has accurate bearings to use in the future. Okay, so here's the finished wildlife sanctuary. Again, I'd like to apologize for the missing footage of the ferry stop. I was pretty bummed when the video came back all glitchy. Luckily, almost all of the rest of the footage I have came out just fine. There are a couple of seconds more that got corrupted a bit later on, but nothing like what we lost here. Okay, back to building. I'm going to just do some fine-tuning to the terrain right over here by this bridge to give it a more authentic texture. Details like this are really important to me, and I rarely show them on camera, so here you can see a little bit of that stuff that I do when no one's looking. Now, let's get thinking about this natural harbor right over here. I'll clear out some of this stuff super fast, and then we'll zoom down in on the shoreline to get our flattened terrain tool set to just a few meters above sea level. Then, we'll flatten out a lot of shoreline all around the area here to that level as a baseline from which we can work. After having initially built the rural road, I decided to reroute it just a little bit over here so that we can begin work on our next project, which was not initially part of my plan. This video took me a week to record, so plans can sometimes change from day to day, and they did right here. I'll flatten out this area here to the lower level, and then build a creek using canal networks. We'll let it fill in with water and speed up until it's stabilized. Now, down on this shoreline, I'd like to add a quay wall to create a wharf. We'll have to rebuild it to make sure it's level with the terrain. Now I'll draw out some measured road segments so that I can place the rotary kiln plant from the ore industry right up against the wharf. I'd like it oriented this way because I think this looks the most like a facility that has elevator systems for loading directly onto ships. There are some good zoned industry assets that look like marine facilities, except they're way too tiny. If someone were to enlarge and modify them with procedural objects, I bet they'd look really convincing. Let's add this mineral storage dome, which also has an elevator system built in, and next to it we can place a glass plant right up alongside the creek. The glass plant is another instance of needing to place a building in order to satisfy the needs of the industry mechanics so that the area functions well, but it looks good enough here as a generic industrial building. Let's set up our entrance gate. We'll use a toll booth again to make this a secure access facility. Now we'll throw down some storage assets in anticipation of both industrial need and covering up our pollution footprint. Spinning around to the other side of the canal, we'll add this medium ore mine crane asset here and a sand storage next to it. This terrain here is ore terrain, so the extraction from this crane will work. I forgot to mention earlier, but unlimited ore and oil mod is enabled so that we don't run out of resources. This is a mod that comes with the vanilla game. Alright, it's about to glitch out again, so I'll fade us into the finished detailed area, which I've named Holly Creek. The default name was Holly Square, I think. Luckily, we basically set up the whole area, and so you can see how I put in just a few more zoned assets and a recycling center among the buildings we'd already placed down. Using some vegetation to cover up the oil terrain also made it look really nice, in my opinion. Why don't you leave a comment and tell me what you think about this bulk aggregate marine facility? Now let's get back to the build. Back at our flattened shoreline, I'd like to add a dual pier ferry stop. See how it's raised up a couple meters from the terrain? By placing down a small segment of street, we're able to ensure that it's flat against the terrain when we place it down. That simple technique took me longer to figure out than I care to admit. Placing waterfront assets is one of the trickiest things to do in vanilla gameplay. I make good use of this technique in my last video, the 100% Vanilla Baby season finale, where I built a large container ship port. If you're liking this build so far, I recommend you check that video out as well. We'll mimic the same procedure again for 2 more fishing docks, but let's make sure they're not all in a straight line. I really want this waterfront to have a bit of variety. We'll fix that little road piece there, and I think this is a nice random arrangement of piers. Now, by the ferry piers, let's fill in some terrain underneath one of them so we can adjoin a road right next to it. I can't get it perfectly square because of the built-in node, but that's okay. It's pretty close. Now with the terrain, I'll build an earthen wall around this harbor so that we can de-water it. This technique is better to use rather than the one I used at the power station for when you want to minimize flooding. Since we're inside of the bay, we'll do this to prevent huge waves going to our town on the other side. Now that the water is gone, we can set ourselves up to build some custom piers. Using streets and paths, we could do the same thing we did before and create some old-fashioned finger piers that vessels might have used in the past for delivering and receiving cargo directly at the stores and warehouses at the waterfront. When you find a town that has these types of piers, either still in active use or as part of the local heritage, that's pretty gangster. And by gangster, I mean cool, if that isn't obvious. Now I'm going to begin a pretty ambitious vanilla project by digging out this field that has ore terrain on it. I'll place the excess soil from this over to the side for later when we build our town. Now, let's remove our earthen barrier and watch the water flow in. Now that it's stable, take a look at how this field was an ore field before we flooded it. We'll make use of that ore deposit in just a second, but first, let's place down the shipyard unique factory asset. Once it's in position, we'll clear out some more land around it. Then we'll get set up to put the seabed mining vessel asset line up right alongside it. The mining vessel and its shoreside wharf need underwater ore to function as an extractor, and the shoreside connectivity line isn't broken by the shipyard being there. Now this is starting to look pretty cool. We'll let the water return, and now we can begin setting up to place a quay wall next to the mining ship so that it looks like it's tied up alongside rather than floating at anchor. It's a completely normal thing to have ships tied up alongside, just hanging out, especially at a shipyard where they might be waiting their turn to go next into the dock, or otherwise they could just be doing crew changes, getting provisions, really anything that they can't do at sea. We'll try to create about a meter or two gap between the ship and the quay wall so that she can fit some fenders in there. Now, shipyards are often multi-building facilities with a variety of workshops and storage areas so that different things can be repaired or fabricated on site at the same time. Putting a ship into dry dock is an enormously expensive operation, and so getting as much done as quickly as possible is the name of the game. So basically what I'm going to do is place some larger ore industry buildings around to serve as different types of shipyard buildings. Separate but adjacent to the shipyard, I want to place this industrial steel plant unique factory asset up over here. The steel factory is a really great, realistic looking asset. I'll add some other buildings here too to make sure that our ore industry is functioning well from a gameplay perspective, but this area is going to be its own kind of thing. Over on this side of the steel plant, we'll prep the terrain to create another wharf. Cities Skylines has conditioned us to think that industry has to deliver goods to the container ship terminal, but in reality, if a large industry can have its own terminal, it absolutely will. Along the wharf, we'll place down a segment of rail that kind of tunnels into the hill. I imagine this will be some kind of internal loading area and not necessarily meant for an outside connection. To avoid having industrial traffic drive through our future town, let's add our controlled access point here. Now, the ore industry main building can move over to the waterfront to be a building in the new town, rather than an office for either of our two industrial sites. By just sliding this over 2 cells, I line up the parking lot with the end of the road. Over on the north side of the waterfront, if we zoom out, we can see that we have enough space for shipping to pass well clear if we add some new docks, so let's do that. We'll plop down the seaweed farm that we unlocked when we spammed our fishing industry earlier. Heading back to our shipyard area, let's finish making some connections and adding buildings. The shipyard asset needs metal, plain timber, glass, and plastic to function, so having storage for all those will help with the supply chain. Let's create a smooth road going over and around this hill that we made so that our waterfront buildings can be connected to the Rodal Road. We'll start reactivating all of our buildings as we ready ourselves to unpause the simulation. Let's not forget to add our fishing boat routes in a simple, efficient pattern that works well for gameplay mechanics. Then we'll connect up our ferry lines with some appropriate courses and turns for realism. Alright, let's unpause the simulation and see what happens. Looks like everything is working fine so far. I'll speed this up and then fade into our post-detailing future. Welcome to the future! Alright, let's take a look around and see what's been detailed in. Unfortunately, the review footage also had some corruptions, so we'll just go right into a different review here. In addition to nature detailing with trees and vegetation, I zoned in some standard industry assets as well as a few of the European ones that we get because this is a European themed map. I'm always frustrated by this ore grinding mill asset. It creates so much pollution that it kills its own trees that come with it. Nothing I can do to fix that, but I think it's really just foolish. I'll showcase the waterfront detailing when we finish our town, but now let's take a look at the stats. As you can clearly see, the new maritime industries have been massively profitable, bringing our bankroll to over $5 million for the first time. Now it's time to do the last project of this episode, our town. We'll clear off this hill we made and get to work creating terraced steps. By doing this, it will provide us with some flat areas to build upon comfortably while still maintaining the unique shape of the hill. We'll snake some roads around to give us zonable areas all along the different tiers. And we'll add a road over here by Holly Creek. Now I want to put a European firehouse down by our ferry Pier Street. Having this here serves as a great aid to navigation with its tower. I imagine there will be a lot of senior citizens in this community that have grown up here, so let's put an elder care in for them. We'll also put a post office over on the corner down by the waterfront. I think this looks good here. How about next to it we put a medical clinic? Over here in this field, I'd like to put a fish factory, which I think I should have done before. It does create some minor pollution, so this terrain texture will mask it a bit. Let's put down a police station over here on the corner of the waterfront. And now, in the last episode of Skyline 6, Joy Build Cities created a leisure district called Friday Nights. You can see it right here. Looks pretty cool. But if we head back over to our town, if you know me very well, you'll know that on Friday nights, you'll probably find me in Schule. So let's put down this European elementary school that says Schule on it. That's close enough for me. Now let's set up for our last detailing fade to see how I grew the town over a couple hours of gameplay. Okay, here we are, back to the future. As we look along the waterfront, we see a variety of carefully zoned commercial and industrial assets which bring the working waterfront vibe to life. Moving up the hill, we start to see a really tight-knit community forming. Now, I chose to use a lot of high-density zoning for a rural town, but I imagine this has been developing over the past century to be just like this. Something that I don't usually do to this extent is zone repeated buildings, but I did it in several spots here and I think it actually looks pretty authentic. Over by Holly Creek, I zoned some European suburbia housing and then switched again to self-sustaining high and low density on this side of the hill. At the very top of the hill, we have our scenic overlook of the harbor. I am really proud of how these projects turned out for this round of Skyline 6, and how the crew has made this whole project really come together against a lot of odds. It is bittersweet for me to be departing for sea for a few months, but as soon as I'm back on terra firma, I'll be jumping in with the crew wherever we're at. If you don't hit the notification bell now, you'll probably never come across my channel again. Since you've stuck around this long, give it a click and this way you'll know when I'm back in business. Be sure to check out the Skyline 6 playlist to see everyone bring their many different talents and creativity to this series as it continues. There's a new episode every Sunday. I hope you've enjoyed this, and, as always, I'll see you next time.